Okay, so today I am going to be talking about a multitude of authors that I am never going to read from again. So consider this an anti-TBR. So there is an actual anti-TBR tag that was going around for a while on BookTube, and I'll link the original creator of that below. I'm not going to do that. There's an assumption in the questions that you're going to be answering for authors you've never read from before. Which, yes, I could say, well, I don't read YA very often, so chances are I'm never going to read a Sarah J. Maas book. Or, I've heard really weird things about the writing in Jay Kristoff's books, and the sexualization of younger girls. So yeah, I'm probably never going to read Jay Kristoff. I thought it would be more fun if I made a list of authors that I have read before, that I've read at least 2 books from, or have attempted to read at least 2 books from, and I have decided, it's it, we're done, we're not doing this anymore. I gave the author a chance, I gave the author another chance, and for some reason, we just don't quite get along. On this list, there's gonna be a lot of popular authors, popular in the universe, a lot of popular BookTube authors, and then some critically acclaimed authors. So get ready for an author you love to be on this list, and we'll get into it. Oh, okay, I have one that I want to bring up where it really should have been second chance author on my second chance author list, but I am so close to not giving this author another chance, and every time I give them another chance, I'm like, why did I do that? And they're very popular. So we'll just get into it. The first author I'm going to talk about, when I first started reading again, post-college, I read a few of his books because he was popular, or easy to find in used bookstores, I guess, and I kept going back to him because, I didn't know what else to read, I guess. But then one of his books really put me off, and that is Nick Hornby. I did see one of his more recent books, on BookTube, and people kind of talking about it. So I originally read High Fidelity, which, if I remember correctly, was about, a couple, someone getting broken up with, and then, a couple, it had to do with music, I think, and being broken up with and being a sad dude. And I enjoyed it enough. I'm sure if I read it now, I would put it down or DNF it. And then I read A Long Way Down, and there's something about books that talk about suicide, and put a lighthearted air around it that really rubs me the wrong way, and almost makes the idea of someone choosing to commit suicide as a fickle, spur of the moment decision, which, yeah, just really rubs me the wrong way. So Nick Hornby and I, we've been done for years, that relationship's been over since 2018, but I thought I'd start with an easy one. Let's keep going along the theme of authors where the writing, just something doesn't work about it. And we're gonna go on to Haruki Murakami. So I read, around the same time as I started Nick Hornby, I read A Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, something like that, which is really bizarre. I enjoyed it at the time because it was weird and it was had me thinking, and it was kind of 2 books overlapped into one. The chapters never really coalesced into something greater, or if it did, I had no fucking clue what Murakami was doing. And then I attempted his more popular book, what is that? Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, and it was so long, and nothing was happening, and it just felt like #deep, and once we were in a fucking hole with the narrator for chapters, I am what am I reading right now? And you keep getting snippets of it was kind of stories within stories, but I don't want to give the wrong idea there. It's not. It's And then we go down this rabbit hole with this person and learn this thing about their life, but then our character's still in a hole. But like another character was in a hole at one point, we'll talk about that. It just didn't work for me. I had a bunch of his books I owned and I just like chucked them all. I think I finally just got rid of 1Q84 because I was like, you're never gonna read this. It's not happening. And it was freaking long. So, Haruki Murakami, another author on this list. So, I feel like this is the one of the people who watch me that they'll be most surprised about. Because she's really, like, well-renowned. I loved her writing. I thought it was really nice. Well, I shouldn't say I loved her writing. Her writing was nice. Her prose were nice. It was all fine. Like, it was like, her writing was good, her plots were kind of good, but there was no, like, spark for me, and that is Margaret Atwood. I have read Handmaid's Tale, which at the time when I was using star ratings, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. The plot was interesting, her writing was nice, but I just never really cared all that much. I just felt like I was, like, being kept at, like, arm's length, that's the right thing to say, from all of her characters, which it never gave the emotional impact that I thought it was supposed to have. And then I read Blind Assassin, and I honestly just had a very similar experience, where it felt overly long for what it was trying to accomplish, and I was just kind of plodding along through it, not really gaining anything from it. It's not where her books, like the other 2 authors I talked about, would ever be like, wow, I hated this book. But I just felt okay with both of them. And that's an indicator that, like, I don't think that there's anything that she could come out with, because her writing style just isn't clicking for me, that I would be like, yes, I absolutely love this. So, Margaret Atwood's on the list. Okay, do I want to talk about the people I detest their writing, like actively hate? Or do I want to talk about, we'll talk about one more where it's just like, doesn't really work for me. And that is Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read, what is her most popular book? Do I own it? Yeah. I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because that was huge on BookTube a few years ago, and I liked it fair enough. People talked about, like, how, like, deeply they felt emotionally connected to everything that was going on, which I personally just never really felt. People really rooted for the endgame romance, I guess, the forbidden romance, and I didn't understand I didn't understand character motivations a lot of the time. I just thought it was fine. Like, I thought it was a good read. I enjoyed it at the time, but it didn't really do too much for me, especially in the way that everyone else talked about it. I felt like I was just, like, missing something. Okay, and then I read Daisy Jones and the Six, which was a totally different format, looking at a band, and it was all kind of, like, told as if it were interviews, and again, it was just, like, fine. It was just fine. It was okay. And then I read a novella by her, and then I read a short story by her called Evidence of the Affair, and it was kind of the email correspondence, maybe it was letters, I don't remember, between, like, 2 people whose significant others were having an affair with each other. And again, I was just like, it just felt like very similar thematically, and just something I don't really enjoy that much. So yeah, like, Taylor Jenkins Reid and I, like, were not happening again. Like, that was it. Now let's talk about the people that I think are one-trick ponies. So for these, I may have enjoyed one of their books, but they're just so similar each time that they come out, or I really didn't like something that they did, that, like, it's over. It's not happening again. First one is Andy Weir. So I read The Martian a few years ago, and really enjoyed it. Thought it was humorous, it was funny, like it was just a fun, lighthearted read. For me, it was a great balance of like science fiction and humor, and like the sciencey part of science fiction. And yeah, I liked it. And then I attempted Artemis, and that one took place from a female perspective, and like, God, just some people do not get women to read their books that are from a female perspective. I don't know. That was not a female character. That was a male character painted with a female body, and you can't convince me otherwise. Yeah, and so I DNF'd it very quickly because I was like, absolutely not, absolutely not, absolutely not. And then I read a short story of his, Randomize, which tonally, it was so similar to The Martian. I felt like Artemis, like from what I read, was tonally similar to The Martian. And then he just came out with Project Hail Mary, which again sounds tonally very similar to The Martian. And like, I don't want to read an author write the same thing over and over again and the same character over and over again. Like, what's the fun in that? Yeah, Andy Weir's on the list. Next person on the list is Matt Haig. I read The Humans last year, and it was like sappy and very heavy-handed, and Matt Haig is very heavy-handed about humanity. And like what humanity is like, and he always talks about like the pros of humanity, at least in the 2 books I've read, and he talks about mental health issues. And for me, because it was from an alien's perspective talking about humanity in The Humans, the heavy-handedness didn't really bother me that much. But then I read Midnight Library, which I'm not going to talk about more. I feel like I've talked about that book a lot on this channel and how much I didn't like it. But again, very heavy-handed in its thematic content. Very similar thematic content. Yeah, just the book, The Humans, worked for me in the moment. I have a feeling if I were to pick it up again in a different time, I would be like, absolutely not. This is a no. And yeah, that's it. Our relationship's over. Nothing else Matt Haig can come out with will intrigue me enough to pick it up. Okay, let's talk about another one trick pony, in my opinion, which I feel like people will disagree with me about. But you know what? My channel, you could disagree with me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, I read this person's maybe debut, I don't know, most popular book at least, and loved it. Was so overly charmed by it that I was like, yes, I found an author that I'm going to love. And then I read another book of his, and the writing was what pulled me in. And it was very nonchalant, to the point. I don't know how to really describe it, but it kind of just swept me up. And then the next book I read, very similar writing, like very similar, conveying the points in the same way. And then the next one I read, very similar, and I'm like, I'm progressively liking these less and less, and I'm like, maybe I just don't like this author. And the author is Fredrik Backman. Yeah, the first book I read was A Man Called Uwe. Loved it. Then I read My Grandmother Wants to Tell You She's Sorry. I don't know. Let me look. I have Google at my fingertips. I can look this up. And y'all, I kept coming back to this author because I was like, no, I'm going to be caught up in the magic again. So I've read a lot of his books, okay? Yeah, then I read My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry, which was a drop-off for me. It had like a Harry Potter-esque like world her grandmother built for her, and there's a lot of like stories from it, so there's like frame storying happening, which doesn't always work for me. And then I read Britt Marie Was Here, and Britt Marie was a character from My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry, and it was fine. Again, I was like, it had the same like charming air as the other two. And then I read, which order did I actually read these in? I don't know if I'm telling you the chronological order at this point, but I also read Beartown, which everyone's like, it's gut-wrenching, you know, like, so heartfelt, which what the book was talking about, rape culture, is heart-wrenching, right? How it was conveyed to me was less so, and even though it was, like, structurally different, the writing just, I was just like, again, he's doing this again, and then I've read his 2 novellas. What are they called? And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, which I actually do enjoy and would probably read again, and The Deal of a Lifetime, which was meh. So I got caught up in his hype hard. I read a lot of his books. And then like, Us Against You, which is like a sequel to Beartown, came out, and like everyone was up in that hype, and I was like, no. You're not doing that again. You're not reading another one of his books. It's not happening. And then Anxious People came out not yesterday, and everyone was giving it a lot of hype. Like, all these people who don't normally read that genre were reading it, and I was like, no, you're not getting caught up in that hype again. It's not happening. You and Fredrik Backman don't work together. So, on the list. Okay, now we're going to talk about 2 authors that I hated a book from. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is my most hated book of all time because bookish internet will not let me forget about it. People talk about it and uplift it all the fucking time. And I, honest to God, think it's one of the worst books I've ever read. I read it when I did read it. And I do not understand how anyone with any semblance of like a physics background, you took an astronomy course, like, I don't know how you could like this, because it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. It is science fiction, right? Like, we could fictionalize science, but we can't change science facts we already know to be true. Like, that's the line for me. If you were writing in, like, the 60s or whatever, and, like, the understanding of science was a bit more limited, okay, yeah, you can fantasize and make it more fantasy for me. If you were writing now, and as an author, you have access to people who will tell you what is correct and what is incorrect, and you don't use it, you're lazy as an author. That's it. Change my mind. Change my fucking mind. You can't. I get really heated about this book because everyone fucking loves it. Why do they love it? It reads like a crime movie. Like, it reads like an action film. Like, there's flat female characters who are only there to serve the purposes of your protagonist. There's just nonsense happening with your protagonist at all turns. And then the climax at the end is so fucking incorrect to what would actually happen in this fake science that I'm just like, no, should I read you my original Goodreads review? Because I was salty as fuck. Let's look. Also, I'm just going to point out, I read this book like 2 or 3 years ago, and I still hate it this much, because everyone reminds me of how much I hate it when they talk about how much they love it. God. Oh, I wrote a long review. Quote, I feel strange, like I'm simultaneously watching movie and acting in it. End quote. This quote perfectly describes one of the many reasons I hated this book. I'm usually not one to totally hate a book. Usually I just disliked them, or thought they were meh. Not this one. Here's a list of all my qualms. Maybe these things wouldn't bother you, in which case enter at your own risk. Number 1, it read like a movie. This is what I felt went through Blake Crouch's mind. I have an idea for a movie, so I'm going to write a screenplay. Oh, no one is going to pick it up? How expensive is it going to be? Well, scratch that idea, but I don't want this plot to go to waste. I know, I'll just add some more description and turn it into a book. Number 2, the descriptions. Crouch would describe random things in the scenes that tended to pull my focus away from the narrative instead of making me more invested in it. I'm all about descriptions, but if you're describing things that have nothing to do with the scene, I want there to be some reason for it. Number 3, Jason, who is the protagonist. For a physicist, this guy was really unintelligent. There were multiple times that the light bulb would turn on in his head for something I had figured out chapters ago. This would be okay if this was a third-person narrative and I had more information than him, but it was first person. I figured these things out based on his thoughts and the scenes around him. Number 4, the sci-fi is a lie. I was a science major in college and took basic physics classes, so I would in no way call myself an expert. It became obvious very early on in reading this that Crouch is not a science guy and apparently didn't bother to do any research. Instead, he used his plot to cover up any need to explore the science part of his science fiction novel. I put the science in parentheses. 5, plot holes galore. This goes along with the non-well-researched physics premise, but I have a feeling that if I reread this book, I would find even more of them. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that to myself because I'm not a masochist. I won't get into spoilers, but further along in this book, some event happens and he starts to contradict a premise he made quite a bit earlier in. There were a few other things about this book I disliked, but I think I'm done with my rant. I feel like it feels good to get that out onto the internet, because I feel like I don't get really passionate about things very often on this channel, but I passionately hate that book. And I also read, what else did I read by him? First, I read The Pines, and I read it, like, on a plane, and was kind of like, this is just bad. Didn't have the same hate for it that I read with Dark Matter. But, anyway, obviously, I'm never reading Blake Crouch again. That one's pretty apparent. I have my last one, which I think you guys know who it is. It's Chuck Palahniuk. Yeah, I read Fight Club. It was fine. The movie was better. I don't think you could change my mind on that. And then I read Invisible Monsters, and I hated it. Instead of, further inducing pain upon myself by reading his books, I decided to get rid of any other book that I owned by him and, call it good. Chuck Palahniuk stans can be living their best life, and I won't be a part of that, thing that they're doing over there. Because, Chuck Palahniuk stans are intense. As I learned when I put up a negative review of one of his books and got called a social justice warrior by anyone who wanted to watch it. So, yeah, I mean, not to say I was going to pick up his books anyway, but the stan worship culture around him put me off of it even more. This whole oh, you just don't get him. Oh yeah, he's just he has a cult following, and if you just don't really look into him and get to know him, then you just will never get it. What the fuck does that mean? What? What? He's a human. Stop acting like he's a god or something. It's fucking weird. Anyway, I got really ranty at the end of this. Wow. It was Dark Matter. It fired me up. This last author. This is the one where I don't think I'm actually done with them, but I think I should be done with them. They're very famous, and they've come out with hundreds of books because they basically write one a year, and it's Stephen King. I read The Green Mile in high school, and I enjoyed it, and then I reread it post-college, and I enjoyed it, and then I read Pet Sematary. No. Just no. And then I read The Shining, and I was like, guys, I finished The Shining. People always say that the movie's better. I'm not a big movie goer, so it is what it is, but I DNF'd the movie. It's a 2-hour movie. I did not finish it. I didn't even get to the famous scene where he's it's Johnny or whatever. I DNF'd it earlier than that because I thought it was so boring. And then there's just a lot of really racist undertones, overtones, and a lot of King stuff, which okay, whatever, it was a different time, blah, 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 whatever excuse people want to put out for him. And not to say that I don't read books that have questionable like things that are problematic today content in them, especially as I dive more into classics. But like, if I don't already really like his stuff, like, why do I keep going back to him? But like, there's the plot of his books sounds so interesting that I want to keep going back. Like, I want to read The Stand or whatever, I think he put it out with his pseudonym. It's like 1,000 pages. Am I really going to do that to myself? Should I do that to myself? Or should I just say, like, fuck it. Let's ink him into this list. Let me know in the comments. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed me getting real ranty for a second there, because whoa. Yeah, that's all I got. So until next time, happy reading.